We have a very special treat today. I'm sitting in the Torch Center in the glorious studio where we record the Parsha Podcast every week. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not alone in the Parsha Podcast studio. I have with me Rabbi Dovid Biron, and this is a very special treat for all of us because he's going to be the guest host or the co-host of this Parsha Podcast episode. And now Rabbi Biron, he is also a relative of mine, and also a good friend of mine, and also a study partner of mine. We're cousins, first cousins once removed. And we study the Parsha each week, and I've been trying to persuade him to do a guest episode to enlighten and elevate the Parsha Podcast with his presence and wisdom and genius for a long time. And thank God he's agreed to join us this week. I'm very excited to hear what he has to say. I have no idea what he's going to say. I didn't get any notes ahead of time. So we're in this together. But I'm really looking forward to this. And this is going to be his debut episode on the Parsha Podcast. And please God, it'll be the first of many podcasts that he does for Torch, because I think he has it. He's got it. I know that when I have an idea that I want to share maybe in the podcast, one of the first destinations that I go to find out if it passes the sniff test is Rabbi Biron. So it's a great delight and a pleasure and an honor to have you here in the Torch Center. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're really, really excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Wolbe. When my family and I moved here just a short 8 months ago or so, the Wolbes were, as he mentioned, welcoming cousin and soon to come a close friend and obviously a study partner. And I feel like I've learned so much from him, and it's really an honor to be here, and my gratitude extended to be able to share some thoughts on the Parsha with all of you. I grew up in a city, a shtetl of sorts, called Los Angeles. Imagine most of you have heard of this. And Los Angeles, in California, Pacific Ocean, beautiful place. And I recall going there one time, and, it stretches on the PCH for miles and miles. You can find a calm, peaceful, open area, clear. And I was just watching the water. And to me, the water is mesmerizing. It's almost hypnotizing. Watching the smooth water, the swelling of waves crash against the shore, falling on the rocks, on sand, receding, and returning once more with vigor. Mesmerizing. But a thinking Jew doesn't merely check off beautiful sights on his bucket list. He extrapolates a lesson, a takeaway of sorts. So I remember standing there with my wife, and I said, this is my thought. You see, Parsha's Vayikra, this week's Parsha, is the first in the Book of Leviticus, the Book of Vayikra, referred to by our sages as Torah's Kohanim, the Book of Priests, the Torah of Priests, for the simple reason it discusses various laws pertaining to the offerings, the karbonos, the sacrifices, the offerings that were brought in the temple, which is obviously performed by the Kohanim, the priests. So this Parsha introduces a variety of karbonos. But what I want to focus on is...
If you could define karbonos for me.
Karbonos, offerings.
Okay.
So, thank you. So, the offerings were generally, we're headed there, but generally, for the most part, were animals that were brought as a sacrifice on the altar. The blood was sprinkled on the altar, which served as an atonement, and many of the fats were burned on the altar. And this was really, in essence, supposed to be perceived as in place of the person himself, where he really should have been, for doing either a wrongdoing or shortcoming of sorts. He should have been taken himself, his soul. He offers in lieu an animal, or as we will see shortly, a meal offering. And this is meant to be an atonement and meant to draw him closer to God.
So you're saying, if I just rephrase,
sure.
And sorry for me interjecting here, I don't know what PCH is, but we'll keep that to the end. There must be some sort of inside joke there from the Los Angelinos, the PCH.
Pacific Coast Highway.
Okay.
I apologize.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes,
that's
Pacific
fine.
Coast Highway.
Okay, but besides that, so someone commits a transgression against the Almighty, and you're telling me that they're supposed to be killed themselves.
That's right. That's right. Our existence is a gift from God. And when we betray him or when we don't come forth as we should in his service, really retribution is in place. And really, we're liable. There's accountability. And God in his tremendous mercy has given us the opportunity to kind of attain atonement through repentance. And one of the steps in the process of repentance is offerings. Obviously, today's days, in the absence of the temple, we don't have that possibility. And the prayer serves in its stead, or studying those laws that we shall do somewhat today serves in its stead. But the concept is that bringing a monetary sacrifice, an animal that a person owns, that he could have used for his own benefit, for his own financial gain, and he brings that and he offers that, and he focuses on the fact that the blood being sprinkled on the altar could have been and should have been his, and the fats offering could have been his insides, being taken for his shortcoming. That's supposed to bring him to thoughts of repentance and draw him closer to God as a path of atonement.
So the animal's the fall guy.
The animal is the fall guy. You could say that. But what I'm going to focus on here is the mincha. So the mincha, discussed in the second chapter, is very different than the animal offerings in that it is only a meal offering. It is flour. Seems to be a meager offering of flour, oil, and a little bit of frankincense, which is a fragrant spice. And only a small fraction of it, a small portion of it, actually, the way it was done was with the 3 middle fingers, was scooped a portion of flour, and that's what was offered on the altar. And that is the offering of the carbon mincha. Now, one would think that, carbon mincha, it's not an animal. It seems to be the most meager of offerings, and it doesn't seem to be very impressive. But the Torah teaches that there are really great lessons to be gleaned from this particular carbon. There's a fascinating passage in the Talmud regarding this meal offering, found in Tractate Menachos 104b. And there are 2 statements from the great sage Rabbi Yitzchak. The first is well known, quoted by Rashi in his commentary on the Torah, and the second perhaps less so. And Rabbi Yitzchak says as follows: Mipnei ma nishtana mincha mikol karbanis. Why is mincha distinct from all other karbanis? Shenemar ba nefesh. You see, the carbon mincha is prefaced with the word, when his soul, nefesh kisakrev, when his soul brings close. This kind of wording is not found by other offerings. Adam, a person, or ish, a man or a woman, but you don't find a soul. Specifically here, says Rabbi Yitzchak, and this, as I said, is more well known. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God proclaims, Mi darka lahavi mincha. Who generally brings a carbon mincha? It's the kind of person who's impoverished, who doesn't have the means to bring forth a more impressive offering, to bring a fattened calf, to bring a sheep or goat. So he brings his mere flour. Yet, God says, Ma la lavani kilu hikreves nafshe. To me, that's not meager. That is beautiful. That is as though you are offering your very soul. We can never judge our production or our output by the mere external appearance or trappings. What is truly measured by is our heart, how much we're giving. What is it? And when the ani comes forth, the poor person, and all he has is this flour and oil, and he says, God, I wish I can bring a proper sacrifice to draw close to you or to attain atonement. But instead I have this flour and oil, and I'm bringing that to you. Says God, no, be not ashamed. Ma la lavakasiv. To me that is deemed kilu hikreves nafshe. He has brought forth on the altar his very soul. He has put himself out in a way that is so appreciated to me, that is so dear to me. I don't look at it like anything's lacking at all. I look at it like he has offered his own essence.
So if someone brings a sacrifice, it could be an animal, it could be a large animal, a small animal, but if they're really poor, all they have is some flour and some oil. And what you're telling me, the Talmud tells that such a person should not feel bad or ashamed as if they're any less because all they have is some flour. In fact, the Torah goes in the opposite direction and says nefesh. This is a soul. This is a person who gave their whole soul. A poor person, all they have is some flour, and they give that to God. They consecrate that for God. They bring that as a sacrifice. The Almighty considers it as if they have brought their soul, even though the actual, the substance of it to us, it would seem like it's much more meager, but in the eyes of God, it's truly substantial.
It's true, precious and substantial. Indeed. Right. Exactly. Where one would perceive this as being lesser, God perceives it as being greater. True. However, the Gemara continues with another point, and this is what I'd like to expound upon. And it offers an analogy and says as follows. There's another distinction between mincha and all other offerings. Now, we mentioned that animals could be brought as a carbon, but there's different ways an animal could be brought. It could be brought as a oila. That's one type of carbon where the entire animal is burnt. Shlamim, which literally means peace, is a carbon where some of it goes on the mizbeach, the altar. Some is consumed by the Kohen who offers it, and some is consumed by the owner, an element of peace, and all being given a portion. But that is the shlamim. And then there is the chatas, which is for specific sins. And then there is the mincha. But mincha is unique from other karbanis, aside for the wording of nefesh, soul. And that is, shenemer ba hey mine tigun. There are 5 different ways to bring the mincha. You see, with other karbanis, perhaps there's a variety of animals, but when you bring the animal, the procedure is prescribed, it's clear, and there's no veering from that. There's minimal, say, room for creativity. When it comes to the mincha, a person has 5 options of how to bring that. And how so? The first is mincha soilas. He can bring it just as flour without baking it. The next 2 are mafet tanur, which means they're baked in an oven, but the oil is either mixed into the flour prior to baking or smeared atop this, biscuit of sorts subsequently. So that's 2 and 3. And then 4 is machavas, which is a kind of shallow frying pan that it's fried in. And marcheshes is a deeper frying pan. So you have literally 5 different ways to offer this mincha.
Deep dish pizza.
Deep dish pizza. There you go. Deep dish mincha. So Rabbi Yitzchak says, what is it? What's unique about this carbon? The shlamim, the peace offering, or the oila, the offering that's entirely burnt on the altar, doesn't offer this variety of means of ways how to offer it, to bring it. So what is unique about this?
He's saying, if I bring an animal sacrifice, there isn't a lot of ways it can be processed. You slaughter it, you take the blood, you sprinkle it, and that's it.
You burn the fats, exactly.
Here, like when the poor person sacrifice with just flour, no, it's not just flour. There's a whole different ways, a whole menu, a whole suite of options.
There's a whole menu. So here's how Rabbi Yitzchak brings it out so beautifully. And I'll broaden the analogy. This is not the exact words of the Talmud, but we'll repeat the words subsequently just to give concept. Imagine you have a king, a powerful king, who, reigns over several lands and provinces. And one day he reaches out to a subject who he's known for some time. And he says to the person, look, you're living in this little village. I'm coming to this village. And it would be a great honor for me if I can come to your house, to your little hovel, your shack of sorts, and have a meal by you. And, this citizen receives this invitation, this cream, embossed invitation from the king. And he sends back, King, I can offer you a meal. What do I know of aged Cabernet? What do I know of prime rib? I don't have a chef, who's graduated culinary school churning out 5-star meals daily. What do I have already? This is like, I can't fulfill the request you're asking of me. And the king sends back, you're mistaken. Do you not have flour? He says, yeah, I got flour. The king says, so then you can provide for me biscuits, waffles, pancakes, cake, and bagels. You can provide me a feast for a king, albeit of flour. You can take your flour and present it to me in 5 different ways, and that'll be the meal that I'll have by your house. And Rabbi Yitzchak says as follows. The Melech says, the king says to his subject, Eini writes mimcha, I don't want from you prime rib. I don't want aged Cabernets. I want what you have. Because if you look inside your toolbox, what you really have, what you're capable of presenting, with a little bit of creativity, you can put forth an entire feast. And that's what I'm asking of you. And when I read this Gemara, I was so inspired. I feel like there's a very powerful lesson here. How often in life do people turn to themselves or turn to others and say, what a shame. My ability to perform, my ability to produce is so hindered and limited and restricted by my circumstances. You see, if only I'd have the family. See, I do have the family because I'm cousins with Rabbi Wolbe. But if only I'd have the family, if only I'd have the fan base, the resources, the money, the stage to truly present who I am, oh, the world would know of me. But now that I'm stuck in my corner, now that my resources are minimal and meager, is it even worth my effort? Is it even worthwhile for me to expend and exert myself in order to produce something, in order to make my contribution to society? It's a fraction of what I'm capable of. I'm not interested. If I really have the circumstances that would provide me with my stage, there's no end to what I could do. People think like this all the time. They say it's not worthwhile. I'm limited. I'm hindered. And it's not even worth my effort. But it's such a terrible mistake. Because with a little bit of creativity, from flour can come forth a feast worthy for a king. And that's what the king wants. The king wants that when the subject has something, he should find a way to make that something his and present it for the king. He should find a way in a meaningful way, to use that in a creative way to serve the king. And that's what the mincha is. The ani says, look at this guy. He's got a fattened calf. He's got a beautiful cow. And that's what he's offering for God. Now that's an offering. I'm coming here sheepishly or sheeplessly without my sheep, with my little basket of flour. That's an offering for God. And allow me perhaps to enlight a pasuk, a verse that's quoted every day in the prayers. And I feel like this really comes to life with this thought of Rabbi Yitzchak. No, what a mistake. With a little bit of creativity, your thing is so powerful. Your offering is so precious to God. We say in the Psukkah de Zimra, in the verses of song, of praise every morning, a verse that's from Chronicles, Se'u mincha uvayu lefanav, which literally translates as carry a present. Gershonides there and others render this as a present, a doron. Mincha means a present. Bring a present before God. But perhaps it's more than that. It's referring specifically to the carbon mincha. And it's saying, Se'u mincha. Don't be ashamed. Don't feel bad. Don't be down. Raise up your mincha. Take whatever you have. Ubayu lefanav, and come before God. Don't think that had I had that religious upbringing, had I had that circumstance, I would truly able to present God a befitting and beautiful gift. And now I come with my meager rations. No. Se'u, carry you with pride. You have a mincha? Hey mine tigun. There's 5 different methods. There's 5 ways you could present that before God. And be not ashamed. Se'u, carry you with pride. How often do people come with their less impressive, externally less impressive mitzvahs, and they feel kind of inadequate? But it's such a mistake. Rabbi Yitzchak teaches us, Mipnei ma nishtanes mincha. Why is mincha different? Shenamar b'hei minei tigun. Because the poor man feels inadequate, and God says, no, don't feel inadequate. Take what you have and bring that before me. And of course, nefesh, that complements the previous Gemara of nefesh, that this is a true expression of the soul.
I love it. If I could maybe add a little wrinkle, the way I see it, maybe that's what you're saying. But if someone has steak, right? They always say with steak, all you need is a little bit of salt and pepper. That's it. Because the steak itself could kind of stand on its own. Full of flavor. Right. Yeah. But if you have some meager ingredients, all you have is some flour and some oil or something like that, you really have to invest your own ingenuity to kind of bring out something valuable out of it. So when someone is really rich and they have all these sacrifices and they have all these resources to worship the Almighty, well, they have those resources, but what are they contributing themselves? If someone has very little, they have to give their whole heart to make that
and their palatable. Whole soul,
and the whole
no
soul,
doubt.
Yeah, to make that palatable. And that's what the Almighty loves, because he wants your heart. He doesn't just want the external trap. He doesn't even need, I hate to say it, right? He doesn't even need the sacrifices, right? He wants our heart. So if someone has nothing really of material to offer, and they're very little, that's just the little basis upon which they can place their whole heart.
No doubt.
And so.
And that's for sure, right? Like you're saying, that for sure, the two statements of Rabbi Yitzchak complement each other. Just as an aside, the Kabbalists say a interesting thought that the 5 Minei Tigun, again, these concepts are slightly above me. I just thought it would be interesting to share an interesting tidbit. The 5 Minei Tigun represent the 5 aspects of the nefesh, of the soul. There's 5 elements of the soul.
Now we're talking.
Now we're talking. The nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yichida. And I'll leave that for Rabbi Wolbe. That's his domain.
Drop the bomb.
But one of the commentaries says this, that's the correlation between the two statements, the nefesh and the hey minei tigun.
Can I interrupt with something
Sure.
cool? So our mutual grandfather / great-grandfather. So Rabbi Biron, his father-in-law, just to simplify this, is my first cousin. And my first cousin and I, we share a grandfather, the legendary Rabbi Wolbe, that I mention on the podcast all the time. So I remember reading a story where at the very early stages of the state, there was a lot of austerity and there wasn't a lot of food available. And today you go to Israel, you got falafel and shawarma and pizza and all the amenities of the modern culinary experience. So you got everything. But it used to be that you had oranges, Jaffa oranges, and eggplant, and that's it. And you had to kind of be very creative. So I remember hearing a story. One of the students in our grandfather / great-grandfather's yeshiva, they came to Rabbi Wolbe for a meal. And the rabbi, the great rabbi, praised his wife that even with such a meager starting point with very few ingredients, you're able to bring out all this flavor and all this enjoyment and all this succulent delight. So I remember hearing that story. You triggered it.
Eggplants and oranges. Unbelievable.
Oh, that's it.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. We have to be grateful for it.
Well, there was a time, I hate to go off schedule here, but there was a time where there was literal starvation in the early 50s. Literal starvation in the Wolbe senior home. Just saying, it happened. I don't know if you know about that.
I'm not familiar, but I'd love to hear. I don't know if it's for the forum, but I'd love to hear.
It's just some of our best friends are just listening to us talking. Don't worry about it. It's private between me, you, and the rest of the listeners. No, but there were times where my grandmother, she didn't have any food. And she didn't let anyone know about it because she didn't want to dampen the experience. When they were founding the yeshiva at the founding of the state, there was nothing. And she kept it to herself. And my grandfather found out about it only later. He had no idea. She kept it to herself. Anyhow, remarkable woman.
Amazing.
Anyhow, sorry for knocking you off.
No, please.
Of course.
Rich family history. Allow me to elaborate on an example or two of this notion, which I found inspiring, motivated me somewhat. Interesting. As I mentioned, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I grew up following the Dodgers. And in the year 2000, Los Angeles Dodgers had a starting pitcher. In 20 games, he had a record of 4-6 with a dismal ERA of 5.15. In 2001, in 33 games, he went 6-7 with an ERA of 4.75. His name was Canadian-born Eric Gagne.
Now, if we could translate this to soccer terms for our international audience. Okay. This is like a goalie who keeps giving up a lot of goals.
A lot of goals.
Or like a cricket player that gets a lot of wickets.
Ineffective keeper.
Ineffective keeper, yeah. Okay, so he was a poor player, not a great player. Okay.
Not making the bar.
Well, he's a Canadian-born. What do you expect?
But listen to what happens. So at that point, he was demoted to the bullpen, which would mean that instead of being a starter, one who would, I guess in European terms, run out on the pitch at the outset of the match. He went on to he was demoted to a reliever.
Europeans, they're like, I don't understand this game. Everyone sits around. There's no athleticism. One guy's over there, and one guy's over there. It makes no sense.
And the time between pitches, right? The time between pitches, a little bit of popcorn, a little bit of Cracker Jack. What can you do there, Eddie? Right. So at that point, he was demoted to the bullpen. And if we try to think about, you talk about the path of ascension toward the top of the athletic world and the work that has to go into it already, from childhood. He's been throwing pitches and he finally makes it to the minor leagues, the developmental leagues, single A, double A, triple A, the 3 tiers, and he makes it to the MLB. And then he just fails. And he's told you can't be a starter anymore. And he's put in the bullpen, which means He'll come into the game as a reliever in middle, but it's a clear demotion. And I'm sure the thoughts going through his mind were like, I can pitch now, but I'm not there anymore. I don't have the form that I had. I wish I'd have one more opportunity to just really show everyone what I've got. My strengths, my pitches, my curve. He goes to the bullpen. And what happened in the next 3 years is Eric Gagne went on to become no less than a phenomenon. He was known as the most dominant closer in the MLB. In 2003, he won the coveted Cy Young Award, awarded to the best pitcher in baseball, even though he was a reliever, a feat that's only been done 9 times.
Dennis Eckersley.
Oh, there you go. Was that 1983 maybe?
Or 92? The best mustache in the history of mustaches.
So we're getting to Eric Gagne in that way. But he literally, in 2003, he completed 55 saves in 55 opportunities, didn't blow one, had an ERA of 1.20. He became such a phenomenon. He was such a celebrity in Los Angeles that people were having contests who could copy his beard, his goatee, who had the best Eric Gagne goatee. He'd become a sensation. Now, I can't imagine that when he started in the bullpen, he was thinking, okay, now I'll be a sensation from the bullpen. It's clear to me that there were thoughts of frustration that I'm not there anymore. But in an interview in 2022, he said, I was lucky to have a chance to start over, to erase negative pitching, and come in as a closer. From failure, he took the opportunity that he was given, and he became a sensation. He rose to the occasion, and he became an unstoppable pitcher. And it's such a lesson to me that where somebody could have just, moped and said, I'm not there anymore. It's not worth the effort. Why exert the energy necessary to be a reliever? In fact, to be a reliever, you got to be ready every day. You got to work out every day. And he did that, and he became such a success. And to me, it's such a lesson that if a person takes the opportunities he has, instead of moping about the ones he doesn't, or the ones he did and no longer has, he can really be successful. He can take his opportunities and use them to the utmost and really perform and really be successful. And Eric Gagne definitely tells that story.
So in our example, you would have someone who all they have is some flour, and they may feel like they're a second-class citizen, and they don't have really a place at the table, and all the rich people are bringing all their expensive animals, and they get all the attention, and look at me, I got this pathetic little bag of flour.
Right.
And you're saying that actually the fact that they have less, there are new opportunities that are open to them that they may not be aware of.
Hey, mine tigun. Yes, 5 different opportunities of expression.
And the Almighty wants to come to your house. To hear what you have to give. And if you do contribute, it's like you've given your soul.
That's right. To try to go in the ways of Rabbi Wolbe, a 5-course meal, but it's a meal offering. There you go.
I love it. Fantastic. And I particularly love how, when we get to the Book of Leviticus, it's always a struggle. Because we're talking about sacrifices.
What's relevant here? What's the daily life lesson?
And you got to kind of dodge around the fact that it seems kind of antiquated and outdated and a little barbaric. Animal sacrifices. It's a hard thing for modern sensibilities to make peace with what's going on over here. We have such large swaths of the Torah dedicated to these practices that we've never witnessed, and it seems very strange to us. And I love how you take this concept and, courtesy, of course, of the Talmud, and you said there's a lesson that's really pertinent to us at every stage of our lives, compared to someone else, we're always going to be a meal offering kind of person,
that's
right? Because you're never going to be the most talented and capable,
right.
Like you said, the biggest audience, the biggest platform.
And just when you think you are, someone surpasses you.
So we all have to realize that the Almighty positions us in the place that we find ourselves in. And in our situation, in our circumstances, we may think it's, suboptimal, but in that area we can flourish. And if it's less, it may be that actually the Almighty is more desirous of it. And He wants to come to our house, and He wants us to invest our creativity to turn that flour into all these 5 different types of processing of them. And when we do that, when we really invest in it, we've given our soul. And ultimately, like you said at the beginning, like the sacrifice is really, it's a way of us giving our entire life to the Almighty. And yes, the Almighty says, okay, let's do it with the animal. Let's do it with something else. And we want you to survive. But this seems to be like it's actually a fulfillment, because you're actually giving, the Almighty says, I consider it as if you've given my soul, your soul to me. So you're actually, in effect, using the words of the Talmud, you are giving your soul to the Almighty. You're fulfilling the actual objective of what sacrifices are really all about.
Exactly. Giving of yourself, however challenging that may be, however little you may think you have, but with creativity, making that your own and giving that, bringing that before God. I recall pondering this passage of the Talmud, the two unique elements of the Mincha, at the outbreak of the pandemic. So I had a son who was born to me right before, thank God. And, as we were in the hospital, things were changing in terms of protocol. You could bring in your own kosher food. You couldn't. And then we drove through the night to, I remember actually, I'll tell you a humorous little anecdote. We asked the doctor, we wanted to do the circumcision by my in-laws' house. That's where my wife would recuperate, having had the baby. That was the best place for us, and it was right before Pesach. So, we weren't holding by making our own Yom Tov and, making our own Passover Seders and everything. So we asked the doctor, what's the best way to travel there? What's the best way to hold the circumcision in Denver? Is it better to fly or to drive, whatever? And he says, the best way to do it in Denver is by Zoom. I said, no, not happening. My wife is not in a place to make the Pesach. So we drove there. Like,
you drove from where to where?
From Minneapolis, where I resided at the time, to Denver. And
that's some drive.
It was a significant drive. I pulled over for an hour and a half to close shut my eyes.
European friends, it's like Madrid to Moscow or whatever. I
just made it up. Sounds great.
Like you said, I told you the way here. So sometimes we ballpark stuff. It's Madrid to Moscow. It's far.
So we made that drive, and I was in Denver for Pesach, and just so many people. I was privileged, obviously, to be with family. So many people were not experiencing the Seder as they knew it. They were not able to be with friends. They were not able to be with family. The Seder is such a unique time of coming together, of sharing, of listening to others and sharing our own. And so many people didn't have that. But I remember recalling something really unique that was going on, and it really resonated with this Gemara, with this passage of the Talmud. I had a friend who, a great friend, I'm going to say his name because I'd love to have his name out on the podcast. His name is Conrad Siegel, a wonderful friend of mine. And he drove for Lyft, for Uber. And he told me, he says, Rabbi Biron, you don't know how many calls I'm getting just to go to the liquor store and back. I mean, people didn't know what to do with themselves, how to deal with these, with these challenges. And that was like a lot of people's route of escapism. So I remember thinking how story after story of the creativity of Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, how within their limited circumstances, we couldn't get together with people. We couldn't leave our homes much. But people were coming up with the most creative chasadim, the most creative ways of doing kindness, most creative ways of serving Hashem between man and God, between man and his fellow, all kinds of creative methods and venues. How within these limited circumstances, we were able to come forth with like brilliant creativity. And I'll just share with you a beautiful story that was going around then. And I looked it up now. It's on dirshu.com. So it was documented in Israel.
Everything on the internet's true, as we know.
Oh, for sure. But it was documented as a true story that happened in America. But I remember that the story had made significant rounds. And it was about a poor old widow who, like many, could not be with anyone for the Seder. It was considered too dangerous. And she had to have her Seder on her own. None of her children, her husband gone already. And there was a neighbor who said, look, you're not going to come join us, but our houses are really close. We'll both open the window. You can stand by the window. And at least you can experience somewhat our Seder. You can hear how we're going through the steps of the Seder, and you can follow along, and at least it will be somewhat of an experience for you. Okay, she was appreciative. And during the intermediary days of Pesach, Chol HaMoed, when, after this Sidarim have passed, the woman gets a call from her son. And he says, Ma, how was the Seder? How did it work out? She says, it was beautiful. It was nifla. It was wonderful. He says, what? How is it so beautiful? She says, you have no idea. It was the strangest thing. This family had the exact same customs and tunes as us. It was just like your father was leading the Seder. Now, I don't know if you know, but Pesach is one of these times that the variety of minhagim, of customs, spans, the spectrum of customs is so broad. Everyone has their unique way of doing this. At every step of the Seder, there's 10 different ways that people do this, and everyone's customs are so sacred and rich, and they're so proud of it. And it was just so odd. This neighbor had the same exact set of customs and tunes and songs as her late husband. And the son says, Ma, I don't believe it. She says, what? He says, shortly before the holiday, I got a call from this neighbor, and he asked me if I can record for him the tunes and the customs as your father used to do it. And I did it for them. And they listened to it and memorized it. And as a family, veered from their common custom of every year and did the one Tati or Daddy used to do. So you should be comfortable, Ma. Isn't that something? And just what can't help but be blown away and moved. And just in awe of the ingenuity and the creativity of chesed in limited circumstances. What can we do? We can serve God when where Seder is consistent of just our own immediate family huddled around. We can't even go out. We can't greet people. We can't. And here this family found the most creative way to a widow's heart. And with brilliance and with self-sacrifice in limited circumstances. Oh, what a meal offering their matzah was. What a meal offering they brought for God that Pesach.
Wow, what a beautiful story. I thought it was going a totally different direction.
I'm like,
the long-lost cousin. That's what I thought.
No.
Oh, wow, what a story. Wow, that is very, really very beautiful.
And I think it's reflective how Jews often very often in history, our circumstances don't smile on us, as it were. That doesn't seem to be beneficial. But we take what we're given, and we bring it forth in a way that really reflects our soul being offered. And this definitely is such a story.
So if someone doesn't have the financial wherewithal like their neighbor has, if someone doesn't have the intellectual or spiritual
or the religious upbringing
or religious or circumstantial, it's not quite the same as it used to be for whatever circumstance, they are given a meal offering opportunity. That's what the Almighty is presenting them. You have an opportunity now to do something that the Almighty is very desirous and cherishes and values. And if you do it properly, then the Almighty is saying it's like you've given your soul to me. And don't say, it doesn't matter, we shouldn't pay too much attention. No, there's 5 different gradients. I want you to take it seriously. Realize the opportunity that has been presented to you and don't miss out on it. There has already been a Moshe Rabbeinu. Abraham already existed. The great Rabbi Akiva, the Rambam. The Almighty does not want me to be them. He wants me to be the best version that I can be. And doing that is me giving the Almighty my actual soul.
1,000%. Exactly. With my circumstance, with my resources, my talents, whatever I've got, bringing that and producing what I can and offering that before Hashem. So as I stood watching the waves of the beautiful Pacific Ocean.
PCH.
Off the PCH.
I gotta get my California bona fides.
There we go.
PCH.
And I thought to myself as follows. This is a takeaway. When God created the world, we know there was a point where water flooded the entirety of the world. And Hashem said, as we say in the psalm that's recited on the first of the month of the Jewish calendar, the Barchi Nafshi psalm, Gvul Samta Bal Yavarun Bal Yeshuvun Lachasis Haaretz. You put a border, Bal Yavarun, that they cannot pass. Bal Yeshuvun Lachasis Haaretz, lest they return to cover the land once more. The water is held back. There's a verse in Job that says, 38:10, Va'omer ad poi savai loisaisif. You can come till here and no further. And prior it says, Va'asim briach vidlasayim. I've put a door with a bar. The water now was locked into the ocean and held back from once again flooding the land.
So we have nothing to worry about climate change?
Oh, well, I was heading for the tsunamis. And we know that it's a tremendous force. When God lets that, the dam burst and the water flood, there's no end to the damage that it could cause. They're called the tsunami of Indonesia, where 100,000 or more were killed, were swept away. So the water is restricted. It's held. At this point, Hashem separated the water. And I feel like those waves, that ocean, wants to crush the barrier, the sand and rocks, and just sweep over the land and just flood the entirety of the globe. But Gvul Samta Bal Yavarin, God says, no, there's a border and you can't pass it. There's a shore and you stay within it. And how would we feel if we were the ocean, if we were the waves? I can't. I don't have self-expression. I'm limited. I can't go all out like I really am capable of, like my potential truly is. I can't burst forward and flood the earth and spread out. So then it's not worth it. Just be calm, be stagnant, stay as is. But the water is the most active element on earth. It crashes against the waves, against the shore, and it sweeps back, it recedes, and it crashes again, and it's mesmerizing to watch. And I feel like this lesson is so brought out in the waves of the ocean, where it could have argued, that's it. So if I can't go all out, what's it all worth? And instead, it serves as the most phenomenal thing to watch, how it's constantly hitting the shore, receding, and hitting the shore in such an active way. And I feel like that could serve as a powerful lesson for us. That when we feel like we're restricted and we want to just say, okay, so then it's not worth anything, crash against the rocks, hit the sand, recede, and crash against the rocks again. Keep at it. Keep at it. What you're doing in your limited circumstances, restricted with the Gvul Samta Bal Yavarin, with that border that you shan't and can't cross, with those limitations in your life, and you want to say, so then what is it? No. It's the most beautiful thing. It's a mincha. It's a nefesh. It's hey minei tikkun. It's 5 different ways of expressing yourself with creativity within your circumstances. Because ultimately, what God gave you, that's what He wants from you. And, I would truly hope that we can take this lesson and try as much as possible, whatever circumstances get us down, whatever lack of resources or lack of stage, makes us feel like we can't perform, we should say, no, in this situation, not despite, but because of these circumstances, I have the ability to bring a mincha and se'u mincha, and to raise that with pride, ubay lefanav, and come before God.
Bravo. That was fantastic. A wonderful lesson from the Parsha. It is a very useful one because I think all of us in some capacity are going to have to take this lesson home. And we cannot just be a docile and meek and tepid and insipid and vapid and just sit around and say, nothing will become of me. What does the Almighty want of me? What can I actually contribute? There's so many other more talented, more capable, more intelligent, more wealthier people out there, and they're the ones who are really going to make the change. No. The Almighty wants you.
He wants you.
Uncle Sam wants you, and the Almighty wants you.
With what He gave you in your circumstances. Exactly.
Beautiful.
I just want to thank you, Rabbi Wolbe, again for this opportunity to share some of these thoughts. Just to close with one question.
Oh, you know that.
As is your custom.
We do a question at the end.
We do a question at the end.
You know why we do a question at the end?
Why?
Because if we have an idea at the beginning of the parsha, and then we have a question at the end, if you take the first letters of the idea or the insight and the question, it's IQ. And we know that the Torah is the only thing that takes the foolish person and makes them wise. Oh, there you go. And people think that, they listen to Mozart or Bach,
in their mind.
Beethoven, and that'll make them more intelligent and more sophisticated and practice for their SATs. No. The one thing that is clinically proven to make someone more intelligent is Torah. So everybody's trying to get a little smart about the Parsha. But really, we hope it'll actually bleed over to other areas of life. So we like to end up with a question to kind of reinforce that point. So is there a question that you want to add?
There is a question.
Let's go.
You may feel you have the answer, that it was provided already. Perhaps. but I want to share, this is actually a question from the Marsha, one of the commentaries, the great commentaries on this passage of the Talmud. And he says that I would think that the analogy with the king and the 5 types of, meal, the 5-course meal is not really analogous to the mincha. It's not a perfect correlation. And why? He says because even though you could bring 5 different types, but each mincha is 1 type. So there is an element of creativity, but the mincha is not 5 meal offerings. The mincha is 1 meal offering.
You get to choose one of the 5.
You can choose. Now you can technically do all 5 too. But the concept of offering a 5-course meal, he says this is not really, it's really a 1-course meal out of 5. It's a menu card that has 5 options that you select 1 out of. I think that some of the thoughts we mentioned could offer a resolution for that. But let's take this a step back.
So the Talmud compares the 5 types of meal offerings to a 5-course meal. But it's not congruent because you only bring 1.
You bring 1.
Oh, that's a great question.
That is
a great question.
So I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you again, Rabbi Wolbe.
So if I wanted to find the answer, I would go to the Talmud in the Book of Menachos on page 104. Is that A or B?
B. But the Marsha doesn't give you an answer. He leaves you hanging.
Okay.
There's the beauty of it. You need Rabbi Wolbe, or you need yourself with your circumstances, with your brain power.
Go find Rabbi Biron and say, give me an answer. Shake him down for an answer in true LA style.
There we go.
Well, I thank you for coming here.
Thank
it was
you,
a delight.
Wolbe.
And we hope that, please God, you'll come again, join us in the hallowed studio here at the Torch Center.
Hallowed indeed.
And continue to enlighten us with your wisdom and your insight. I'm very appreciative of that. And, this was wonderful. It exceeded expectations.
Oh, wow.
And, my email address is rabbidovid.com. Do you want to give, your email address to all the stalkers at the Parsha Podcast?
Do I?
No, I don't know. I don't know. You don't have to. If they want to email you, they can email me and I'll forward it to you.
Yes, they should reach out to me through Rabbi Wolbe, and I would love to hear all comments. And maybe
if he gets a little more comfortable and gets some love from the Parsha Podcast family, maybe he'll give us an answer to that question and his email address. But we'll see. Right. We're just getting started. We try to, like boiling the frog. We're boiling the frog. You start slowly. Come here. We'll get you a coffee. Here's some water.
That's right.
And come see the microphone, see how delightful it is.
That's right.
You could do it. And the next time we'll okay, come on. Here's your Torch Web email address. Let's go.
Right.
Here's your uniform. Here's your microphone. Let's go. Okay. Thank you so much. This was fantastic.
Thank you
I appreciate all of y'all for listening. And have a fantastic rest of your day and a splendid rest of your week and a sensational, terrific, uplifting, invigorating Shabbos upcoming. And please God, with the help of the Almighty, we will talk again next week. Thank you so much, Rabbi Biron.
Thank you again.